everyone. We're back at CPAC now, America Uncanceled. Remember, 7 p.m. Eastern, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I'm Mercedes Schlapp. We have all these great guests that we've been having all week long. And joining me, of course, Matt Schlapp. What's going on,
I don't
Matt?
even know what day of the week it is, but there's so much going on. But we have a great guest today, and I scroll through Twitter fairly often.
You live on Twitter.
It's not true.
Schlapp sometimes. I'm getting worried. I got to talk to Jack Dorsey about that.
And we're going to throw up a great tweet on the screen to introduce our next guest because it's a classic. It's not a Coke classic, but it's a classic.
Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, read it.
Okay. So it says Coca-Cola's new flavor in honor of their false claims against SB 202. And that has a great graphic. You see it up on the screen. Coca-Cola Zero Facts, made with 100% real liberal outrage.
Great
Just
job,
beautiful. Just
Jody
beautiful.
Heiss, Congressman Jody Heiss from the great yet troubled state of Georgia, who has recently announced that he is going to be and is running to be Georgia's next Secretary of State because he actually believes that we should follow the rules around voting. Jody Heiss, thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you. Thanks so much for having me.
Now, you're a great conservative in Congress. You have a great voting record. We've worked really closely with you. You've spoken at CPAC, I think, every time we could possibly make it work. Why have you decided that you want to leave your employment working for Nancy Pelosi and go back to the state of Georgia and fix this problem?
He doesn't work for Nancy.
I know.
Come
It's
on,
kind of a joke.
Seriously.
When you put it that way, I'm surprised I've stayed as long as I have, to be honest with you.
That's great.
But no, listen, the elections in Georgia, as the whole nation knows, they were an absolute disaster because we have a miserable Secretary of State currently there, Brad Raffensperger, who did not follow the rule of law, who unilaterally himself chose to change the election laws in Georgia, for which he has no authorization to do. Georgia deserves better. The United States deserves better. And elections matter. And we need to make sure that only legal ballots are cast and only legal ballots are counted. How difficult is that? If we lose our voice as American citizens when it comes to the voting booth, we're in big, big trouble. And so someone has got to challenge Brad Raffensperger, and I believe I'm the one to do that. And I hope the voters of Georgia will entrust me with that role to get our elections back in order.
Yeah, there's no question that what we've seen is a huge backlash, I think, for the people in Georgia when you've seen the Major League Baseball pull out of Georgia, taking the All-Star game to Denver, Colorado. Why are these corporations so misinformed when it comes to the Georgia law?
I don't know that they're misinformed. I think it's very deliberate. They're scared of this cancel culture movement. They are scared of the Democratic Party, who is right now just bashing everyone on the head, who does not embrace their liberal, socialist, Marxist ideology. And people are scared of them. I know as I'm talking to hundreds of people across the country, and in particular in Georgia, people are frightened with the direction of our country. They are frightened by this out-of-control Democratic Party, and I believe that is reflected in many corporations who right now just don't want to deal with the backlash of the liberal left wing and the cancel culture movement that they use as a billy club to pound people over the head. But nothing could be further from the truth when it comes to the accusations that Georgia somehow is restricting votes. That's absolutely false.
Two quick things. We have a proud tradition in the Republican Party. The Republican Party was created to end slavery and to give civil rights to Black Americans. And we need to cherish that history because it's not being taught in schools. Second of all, I hope you're seeing what the American Conservative Union is doing vis-a-vis these corporations. We sent a letter to Delta Airlines CEO yesterday, to Major League Baseball. Your colleague Roger Williams has been helping us as a former ball player, and to the NCAA. We're going to be doing a lot more of this. Is this the time for the conservative movement to get on their hind legs and say no more from these corporations?
Absolutely. And I can't thank you enough for your leadership with that. And there are many who are joining that effort. Look, we're in the fight of our life for our country. And if we sit back now in our lazy boy chairs thinking that somehow this is going to pass without consequences, then we just literally have our head in the sand. This is a battle for the heart and soul of America, for the heart and soul of liberty and the freedoms that we all cherish in this country. This is the time, exhausted or not, this is the time to stand up, dig deep, get engaged in the battle that's taking place in our country, because there literally is just so much at stake. We cannot sit back. We cannot afford that luxury at this critical point in our country's history.
We've also seen, for example, conservative Black leaders come out and defend the Georgia voting bill. They're also hitting the biased news media coverage. You know, I think it's very telling. We just saw yesterday, or in this week, the Senate Judiciary Committee, where Stacey Abrams appeared, and literally, I think the title was Jim Crow: The Latest Assault on Voting Rights. You know, what is your reaction on how Republicans can, tackle the Stacey Abrams machine that she's built in Georgia?
Yeah, she really has been allowed to build a political machine that's going to be extremely difficult to overcome, but we must overcome it. If not, not only does Georgia lose, but as a result, our nation will suffer, as we saw this past election cycle. And so we've got to stand up to this. This Jim Crow 2.0 type nonsense, this rhetoric is absolutely false. The only thing that is being restricted in the Georgia election law is cheating. And both sides of the aisle ought to embrace the concept of no cheating when it comes to elections.
Let me jump in on this, Jody, because I should start calling you Mr. Secretary, because I'm pretty confident you're going to do well. And we're going to ask you how folks can help you, because they want to help you. But I've met with conservative supporters of ACU in the last weeks who have said if they're going to cheat this much, we should cheat this much. This is the danger when this outrageous cheating on the left with socialists is allowed to stand, because it's inevitably going to encourage everyone to say the only way you win an election is to stuff that ballot box with illegal ballots.
Yeah, that's right. And we cannot go there. Neither side can cheat. What we've got to do is have free and fair elections so that everyone's on the level playing field. If we lose that, we are going to lose our country inevitably. You just cannot walk away from fair elections. And that is what, at least this battle, and we have many battles that we're facing right now in our country, but not the least of those is free and fair elections. We have got to win that battle.
Yeah, and I find that you've seen, so many of these corporations signing on to not agreeing to the Georgia voting law, and then making this case against voting ID, which we know the vast majority of Americans agree with. Why do we need the voting ID? Why is there this hypocrisy that exists where if you're going to fly Delta Airlines, you need to show your ID to get on the plane, but not to vote?
Yeah, I mean, it just makes sense. It's common sense. And the only reason that someone would be opposed to thorough ID before voting is because they want to cheat. That's the only reason that anyone would not be in favor of ID before you vote. And that is what we had in Georgia. That's what we had in several other states across our country. And we've got to put a stop to it. We've got to make sure that only legal ballots are cast and only legal ballots are counted. This is not rocket science. And the centerpiece of making sure that takes place is to make sure that those who are voting are who they say they are. And that's identification.
We had a conversation the other day, Mercy and I did, with a dear friend who was saying, I need to learn more about this argument around illegal voting. And I think in Georgia and in Nevada, where I was, it's pretty simple. The very first step of that is that when you have an explosion of mail-in ballots that are mailed to people who don't even request them, and multiple ballots show up, and there's no process to make sure that only one person votes once in the mail, because nobody verifies the signature, which is what the governor and especially the man you're running against, the current Secretary of State, I hate saying his name, basically didn't check the signatures on these ballots because Stacey Abrams was able to force him into this consent decree. They did the same thing corruptly and illegally in Clark County in Nevada, to the point where basically they didn't kick out any false votes through the mail. That alone would have changed these outcomes. So people need to get right with the facts on this, right, sir?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Matt. Listen, March a year ago, myself and other congressional members of our Georgia delegation had a conference call with Georgia's Secretary of State. We urged him not to send out applications for ballots to everyone on our voter registration file because we all know our registration file is between 5 and 10% inaccurate. Now, just think of this. We have 7 million voters in Georgia. 10% inaccuracy means 700,000 illegal voters received a ballot to get they received an application to receive a ballot with no identification associated with that. 700,000 people. And yes, we had an absolute disaster there. So the problems, among others, include both the proper identification before voting, but also not sending out ballots to everyone on the voter registration file. We've got to get these files cleaned up, but we've got to have identification to make sure that those who do vote are legal voters.
Shifting gears, you have one of your colleagues, you might know her, AOC, along with Senator Ed Markey. They just introduced and they're pushing for the Green New Deal. And this, of course, moving away from fossil fuels, and it's a very, very expensive plan. Their goal, 100% carbon-free economy. How do we stop these radicals?
Yeah, listen, it's very difficult when you're in the minority. There's no question. At the end of the day, the majority gets their way, at least in the House of Representatives. A little bit different in the Senate. But they do what they want to do right now in the House. And they are bulldozing over not only Republicans right now, but over the American people. And I know those of us in the Freedom Caucus have been doing everything we can to try to throw sand in the gears, trying to call for votes on all unanimous consents and voice votes and all this sort of stuff. And just yesterday, again, the Democratic bulldozer rolled over us with that to no longer allow us to do that, as they're putting all the suspension bills in one on block type thing. So look, they just continue bulldozing over us, but we have got to continue fighting with every parliamentary tool that we have accessible, both in committees as well as on the floor. So we're just continuing to explore any and every option we have to stop or slow down this assault against our liberties and against the principles that are cherished here in America.
One final question before I ask you how all of our CPAC community can help you in this really important race. I shouldn't do it because we have a system, but you will be endorsed by ACU. Don't worry about that.
That was, I think, the fastest endorsement other than maybe President Trump, okay?
But look, one of the things you have to do as Secretary of State is make sure, as we said, only legal people vote, only people who are legally in America vote. How does it feel to be a congressman who's going to be told you have to have a inoculation passport? You have to pass through a metal detector to get in and vote in the United States Congress. You have to have entry through a port of entry through a wall that Nancy Pelosi has put up around the Capitol. How does it feel to be a congressman with less rights than the illegal folks that are literally running, skipping into this country with no inoculations? Many have COVID. It's almost like Joe Biden's put out the welcome mat. How does that feel as a congressman?
It feels horrible. It feels horrible. And it's but there's a point that I think it's good for members of Congress to personally experience the robbing, the stealing of their own freedoms right here in Washington, because that puts some fire in the belly to stand up for the rest of America who's feeling the same things, who have watched over the past years their businesses being taken away, their inability to worship at houses of worship that they choose, their kids not being allowed to go to school, on and on and on. We are watching an assault on the liberties and freedoms of our country. And from that perspective alone, it's a good thing that members of Congress are getting a taste of it as well, because this is uncalled for. We call this Camp or Fort Pelosi, with walls around it, razor wire. It's horrible. It is horrible to think that we can't even get into the Capitol. We can't even have guests. We can't have constituents come visit us in our offices. This is anything but the symbol of freedom of the world right now, and it's all resting on an out-of-control Democratic Party that is entrenched on controlling the American people and taking our freedoms away from us. And as I mentioned earlier, we're in the fight of our life. We cannot let up at this point. We've got to dig deep and give it everything we've got.
I want to make one correction to Jody Heiss. It is the Socialist Democratic Party.
Yes.
I think we have to call them out for what they've become.
Yeah, but my question is, Congressman, in Fort Pelosi, do you get really expensive ice cream? That's just my question.
Not if you're a Republican.
That's right. That's right. So, Jody Heiss, how do people who want to have rules-based voting and only legal ballots, but we fight for everyone's right to cast that legal ballot, what can they do to help you?
Well, listen, I can't thank you enough for that offer, and thank you for your endorsement. And I'm proud to have the endorsement of President Trump as well. Grateful for that. But yeah, listen, I welcome any and all help. It's going to be a huge battle, and people can simply go to our website, jodyheiss.com. It's that simple. Everything they need to know about the race for Secretary of State and how they can help us personally in this race is right there, jodyheiss.com. And I urge people to go there, learn more about us, and do whatever they can to help out.
Well, thank you, Jody Heiss, for joining us. Good luck in your race to be the next Secretary of State of Georgia. If we vote in the next election like we voted in 2016, you will win, and we will win again in 2024. Thanks for being with us on CPAC Now. Keep up the great work, and we're going to be right back with a Twitter storm after this short break.
Well, that was a great interview with Congressman Jody Heiss. What a great guy. But, you know, as usual, Schlapp, starts on this tweeting frenzy. I mean, is it because you don't really want to have a conversation with me? What's the deal? What's going on here?
No, it's because what's happening in the country is so alarming, right? It makes you want to say something.
No, yeah.
And we have found that just watching it dispassionately on a television screen or reading your newspaper isn't as interactive as we'd like it to be. So these social media platforms are really important.
They are.
And that's why we got to find ones that actually like conservatives, right?
Right. And then they
liberals.
Won't,
how about both?
And they won't censor us, but you haven't been censored yet, I have to say. That's been...
Yes, I have been.
Oh, you have?
On all of them.
Oh,
yeah.
Really? On Facebook you were?
Yes,
that's right.
Several times. And what's weird on Twitter, if you really send a tweet that gets everyone's attention, it takes off like a rocket, and out of nowhere it'll die.
Right.
And that's what they call throttling. So they kind of manage how big your tweet can go.
Well,
but it takes those little crap heads in the Twitter office some time to figure out what's taking off, and then once they figure it out, they're like,
they cave in.
Yeah.
But I thought one of your tweets, I think it's where a lot of Americans, what a lot of Americans are feeling following what happened in the tragedy of the loss of life of George Floyd.
Yeah.
And that case, obviously the Derek Chauvin case is something that I think people were watching. They wanted to know what was going to happen. He was found guilty of the 3 charges. And obviously there was a lot of activity going on outside in the streets of Minneapolis. But I think, now we're looking at what is next. What is next for our nation? And you tweeted out, please pray for racial healing in America and stop listening to anyone fomenting a race war in our streets. Pray for cops and pray for justice when cops do wrong. If we stay here, we will never be great or united. And I also say we have to pray for all of our communities because it is, the minority community that has suffered greatly. We know this through the work that American Conservative Union has done in our criminal justice reform efforts.
It's true.
And so it is trying to find that dialogue and that conversation between law enforcement and our minority communities so that they're working together to try to find common sense solutions.
But I use those words deliberately. So Trump ran on making us great again. And Joe Biden ran on unifying us. Now, Joe Biden's actions are so ununifying that he's only playing to the left. Donald Trump did not come in as a unifier. He came in saying, I'm going to break all the China, literally, in order to make us great. And so this is really a call to both sides, which is if we want to be great, we can't be having race wars in our streets. If we want to be unified, the same thing goes. So we got to find a way to get through these moments and move beyond. And what I was really distressed at is for the Black Lives Matter Incorporated crowd, they just seem to want to stay here on the agitation against cops. by the way, there's a lot of black cops, and it's just not fair.
That's right. And you did mention in another tweet, this was in regards to the judge that was handling the Chauvin case, where when we saw Maxine Waters come out and make her comments about being confrontational, being active on the streets, he really was alarmed by that. He called Waters' comments abhorrent. You of course tweeted out, this is a Democrat judge who got tired of being manipulated by politicians. I think this is a very interesting point, because you are going to continue to see, now while the George Floyd case was very unique, there was substantial evidence in this case, you're going to see these cases play out throughout the country.
And look, I said manipulated, but really the word is threatened. When politicians make judges feel unsafe or juries feel unsafe, which exactly is the card that these Democrats were playing, which is fomenting the race war in the streets before the jury comes to an answer. Now, I've been pretty clear in my Twitter that it looks very clear like George Floyd was killed. So it doesn't surprise me that there was a guilty verdict. I thought that he would be charged at least with something,
right.
This police officer. But why foment the mob violence and the riots and the threats in the street in order to get to that verdict? And this is what Maxine Waters did against Ted Cruz and against all those Republicans like yourself who served for President Bush. Go into that gas station and heckle them. Go into that restaurant and get in their face. And this is part of her tactic. It's a terrible tactic. I think it's an un-American tactic. It's certainly not ever going to unify us. So when you hear Democrats talk about unity, while they're talking about literally making us feel unsafe in our homes, and you and I have had to experience this as well, it's not going to work.
No, exactly. Let's shift gears to a positive note here. Great news. This is coming from American Airlines, bringing all pilots back on the job and hiring new pilots for the first time since the start of the pandemic. I found this to be very interesting. You responded by saying, great news, now let's keep the planes flying everywhere. And as we know, the State Department is following the CDC recommendations right now, where they're saying they're pushing forward this do not travel advisory. We talked about that this week on the show, where literally you cannot fly to 80% of the countries worldwide.
Yeah, so it's great that our domestic airlines are starting to retool and bring people back on the job as Americans get their shots, their vaccines, their Trump vaccines, by the way, and start to feel more safe about travel and stuff. But you can't have this discordant message that it is somehow unsafe to travel. You can't go overseas, because what's going to happen to these...
Even if you're vaccinated.
Right. These
That's
domestic airlines is they're going to start to go right back down, and they're going to have to reduce their workforce. And then they're going to come to Congress for a bailout. And what, our message to Delta Airlines is, you've chosen sides between the D's and the R's. When you come back to get those funds from Congress, the R's are not going to vote for those funds.
Right.
And a lot of R's were okay with you getting those funds because you had been shut down by the government. So be awfully careful. And to the Biden administration, they need to be awfully careful sending these signals that somehow it's unsafe to fly.
That's right.
Even after you're vaccinated, like you said, or that you have to wear a mask after you're vaccinated, because Tony Fauci just really wants us to all wear a mask forever.
Yeah, just don't wear those pattern masks that he wears. My goodness, it doesn't work with his outfits, but that's a different
I try
story.
not to look at him, so I don't really know what he's wearing.
Well, we've got a couple of other things happening. We talked about AOC and Senator Ed Markey. They're pushing this Green New Deal legislation. We know that the Democrats, these radicals, are going to keep, in essence, as a Congressman Heiss said, bulldozing their agenda forward. And now we've also learned that White House officials have told supporters they will pledge to reduce U.S. greenhouse gas emissions by at least half by the end of the decade, an almost doubling of the nation's earlier commitment. You said, or tweeted, get ready, forgotten Americans. Your energy and food prices will be going up, 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 and we won't be making things again here. Tragic impact on jobs, which had been coming back.
Right. So one of the reasons why manufacturing became too expensive in America, and we got this whole concept of the forgotten men and women, is because Democrats like to make the staples of life cost more.
Right.
Healthcare went through the roof under Obama with Obamacare. When they bring in these green policies, fossil fuels go through the roof. And so the business has trouble paying those energy costs. The healthcare costs make it more expensive to have labor. But think about that family sitting around the kitchen table. Hard to pay the electric bill, hard to pay the gas bill, hard to fill the tank with diesel or fill the tank with gasoline.
Right.
I mean, this is the impact it has on, Barack Obama's going to be able to pay to heat his $3 $10 million houses. But if you're just an average Joe sitting out there in the country, including a lot of middle-class black folks, it's hard to pay these bills. And I don't think politicians should cavalierly say, hey, it's okay, it's just going to cost a little more. And how the heck is Mazie Hirono going to get back to Hawaii? Remember, they said you have to take a train because you can't fly planes. And by the way, if you can't fly planes, I expect to hear from these airlines their opposition to the Green New Deal.
Right.
Because it hits them right where it hurts.
That's a great point to see where they will stand on this. Right now, what we keep seeing from them is a lot of silence, which is kind of interesting to watch. One other tweet here, since we're sticking on the climate topic, Bo Snerdley, one of our dear friends, tweeted out China's Xi, that's President Xi, to attend Biden's virtual climate summit. That's really news breaking here. Xi is laughing at us, you tweet out. USA will hurt its economy in exchange for China reaping all the economic benefit force their coal-driven economy.
You know what I learned when we went to protest with those brave people in Hong Kong, and so sad what's happened in Hong Kong, and Jimmy Lai should be freed from prison. But what I learned in talking to Jimmy and these other great Democrat leaders when we went with Gordon Chang and the rest of the team is they love to call Xi Winnie the Pooh because he kind of looks like Winnie the Pooh. So do you know what a typical communist leader did? He made it basically illegal to have any images of Winnie the Pooh. So when we see Xi laughing at us because he's going to get all the jobs, right? He's going to get all the coal we don't use.
Right.
He's going to get all the manufacturing jobs that are too expensive here because we've made our energy prices too high. Let's just say this. Let's fight Winnie the Pooh. What do you say? We should start mocking
Winnie's
him.
too cute. I don't know. Maybe we go back to just fighting President Xi for crying out loud.
I think we call him Pooh, or maybe Poo Poo.
How about Poo Poo?
Yeah,
that's
Poo Poo
better.
works. Anyway, we need to get real because this unilateral disarmament to the Chinese and this economic war, we're in a military conflict with them, but we're also in an economic war. I say let's fight for America. And that's what President Trump understood.
Well, and I think they smell weakness. I think the Chinese recognize that President Biden is a weak leader. And so I think they're going to take more advantage, even on the scale of what they're going to do with Taiwan, what they're doing in the South China Sea. And so they are going to continue to take advantage of our American workers. And we're just not in a strong position to defeat China. That was something that the President Trump really understood.
Well,
there was a sense of respect between those two leaders, and China couldn't mess with us.
If to keep the cartoon analogy going, Donald Trump was probably more like Tigger. He was all over the place, boundless energy, here, there, everywhere.
That is fabulous.
And Joe Biden is a lot more like Eeyore. You see him from time to time. You can't really understand what he's saying. And he is the low in low energy, wouldn't you say?
Maybe he's competing with Jeb Bush.
How about Eeyore with a mask?
Oh, boy. All right. Well, let's move on to Stacey Abrams. We know we've been talking with Senator Ted Cruz about this, as well as Congressman Jody Hice. We know Stacey Abrams was over at the Senate Judiciary Committee this week talking about the, quote, latest assault on voting rights. You tweet out, in quotes, Governor Stacey Abrams on her 2018 campaign. They stole it by disenfranchising voters. Media, she's a civil rights hero. President Trump on 2020, they stole it with illegal ballots. Media, he incited a riot and destroyed the Constitution. Some language, opposite media reaction, propaganda. My goodness, I feel like I need to decipher that one.
Well, Ted Cruz did a great job in just like eviscerating her on national TV because she continues to say that she's not the governor because they stole it.
Right.
And nobody in the media ever says, wait a minute, that's inappropriate language. Donald Trump says, I'm not the president anymore because they stole it. And they say outrageous rhetoric.
Right.
You're inciting people to violence. This is unconstitutional. Mind you, Stacey Abrams has never called Governor Kemp and conceded.
Right.
Right? And that's fine. It's fine. So this is the double standard that half of the country is crying foul over.
Huge hypocrisy there. And then we're closely wrapping up here. Two more tweets. One is you were talking about Senator Cruz. He opposed to a state lawmaker's bid to replace Congressman Wright. Sadly, Congressman Wright passed away in Congress. this state lawmaker received money from the infamous Lincoln Project. You tweet out, any GOP candidate associated with Lincoln Project Republicans should be defeated with vigor. I think we all can agree with that.
Yeah, we're not hearing much about the Lincoln Project. It's kind of strange. Just kind of disappeared.
I think they're too busy dealing with their own scandals.
What's weird is
but they made a heck of a lot of money, let me tell you.
There was a lot of beach houses bought by the founders of the Lincoln Project. At least the male white founders of the Lincoln Project did really well. But what's amazing is that when the woke left, or those on the right who facilitate the woke left, who are also loved and get invited to the cocktail parties, as soon as they hit a scandal, they get to disappear.
Oh, completely.
When the Republican hits a scandal, wow, it's on every headline. You have to talk about it constantly.
Yeah, we haven't heard from those guys in a very, very long time. So they have their own problems to deal with. And then to wrap up, so we can keep going. This is a wonderful tweet.
Wait, are we going to keep going, or are we going to wrap up?
Well, we got to keep going because we got to go and take care of the kids at some point, but that's a different story.
My kids are at school. Oh, no, we have a sick kid.
There's one.
Yeah, there's one sick kid.
Okay, so archaeologists, this was a Hill article, archaeologists say Harriet Tubman's home was discovered in Maryland, which I find this to be so fascinating. You added a tweet, heroes don't always wear capes. I thought this was just so amazing. She's such a hero, such an incredible hero, someone who was escaped from slavery, led 13 missions to rescue approximately 70 enslaved people. I mean, talk about a fearless leader, more of what we need to see today in our country. Yeah,
I mean, and look, we're the parents of 5 girls. This is the kind of courageous woman who, I don't even know how she did these things. I mean, I would have been so scared to lead so many people to freedom. It just reminds us all about how this all gets kind of swirled in the media coverage. Let's go back to raising up our heroes. Let's go back to telling the stories of America that was in a civil war, and we got to a place where slavery was made illegal and people got civil rights, yet you had Jim Crow. By the way, Jim Crow was a creation of the Democratic Party, as was slavery. And so, we went through these periods of time. We have to get through them, and then we have to get to a better place.
That's right.
If we don't get through them and get to a better place, we'll continue to go down this slide where we hate each other, where we fight each other, and we'll have all this unrest. And, the only people who benefit from that are the people who hate America overseas. Let's show the people overseas that America's better than all this, and let's come together. We can do it.
We can do it.
Let's be as brave as Harriet Tubman was. Maybe that's impossible. We can get a little bit closer.
And it's a great lesson to teach our kids. And remember, we're not here about erasing history. We want to teach American history and love of nation, and the fact that that it's important for them to step up in the fight, as well as we continue to defend our Constitution and protect our freedoms.
And look, we're Catholics. So you guys probably know that because we had our priest on one of the shows. But when you have great leaders like Harriet Tubman, who are not with us any longer, we assume that she's with her Maker. We ask for her prayers. We ask for the prayers of everyone for our country. We really need them during these times. And we're going to keep doing the show. We really love doing it. My ego is hurt a little bit because most of the feedback we get is the show's so much better now that Mercy's doing it, but whatever. Follow us all on all of our social media accounts. Please follow CPAC, follow the ACU. Slightly different missions between those two projects. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Follow me at mschlapp on Twitter. Follow Mercedes at Mercedes Schlapp on Twitter. And keep watching the show and keep giving us your feedback, and get ready for the next letter to corporate America, because the smart lawyers are drafting it right now. We'll be announcing that very soon.
Good night.